With your hand, save me. Together with your hand, save me. Save me.
Actually, they didn't do that. They didn't do that in grunge concerts, right?
I don't know
about Satanists.
I don't know what they did. I mean, I went to some shows.
I think they were all just depressed church kids. Don't you think? Yeah, you don't think that Chris Cornell and
depressed church kids? Wow,
what's her name? Oh, what's her name?
I don't know. Courtney Love.
Courtney Cart. I was about to. Courtney Cox.
Courtney Cox. Yeah.
They didn't go to church. Didn't go to Sunday school. I'm sure they did.
Well,
that was excellent, dude.
How many bands do you see kind of wearing Sunday school clothes on stage?
I don't know. I don't see, I don't think I ever saw any kids wearing olive shirts. I think this is like the traditional, or it's the official color of grunge.
Is it?
Isn't it?
Well, it could be. Yeah.
Or gray.
Grunge came out of, this Pacific Northwest deal, which prior to Seattle being a cool tech, whatever hub, the Northwest was a logging region of the country. And the reason people lived in the Pacific Northwest was trees. And you were loggers, and you're like, argh! And
really,
the forest products industry was 100% the reason for the Pacific Northwest. It's because where all the trees are. And
I thought it was Sasquatch tourism.
Well, Sasquatch is hiding.
Quite honestly.
Sasquatch is hiding out amongst the screaming trees.
Yeah.
You like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Under the black hole sun.
I've got my Sub Pop t-shirt on, which is, the local Seattle record label that had signed Soundgarden and Mudhoney, all those bands back then. It was amazing. I encourage, if anyone who didn't know what happened in the Northwest in the first half of the 90s, if you can find it, there's a movie called Hype. And it's kind of like a documentary. It was put on by the Sub Pop folks.
Wow.
It was cool to see what happened and how it influenced fashion. Like, apparently people who were in Seattle were getting phone calls from people from the New York Times or Bloomingdale's headquarters or Macy's in New York. Yeah. What's everybody wearing in Seattle now? Well, and what was the clothing you saw? It was lumberjack clothing. It was clothing that people, think about,
Oh, wow.
Kurt Cobain and all
that.
Kurt Cobain came from Aberdeen, Washington. Yeah. That's a logging town.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a seen better days logging mill town now. And so they all wore that flannel, those flannel shirts, everything. That's just what loggers wear. And so that whole look,
so weird.
That whole grunge look came from the background of the Northwest being from the forest products industry. Weyerhaeuser, all those kind of companies, it's all loggers.
Yeah. I had no idea. Dude, we should rebrand this show and call it Grunge IoT History Channel.
I do like that.
You're just dropping some serious wisdom and history, and
I'm a grunge history teacher.
Yes, it's amazing.
You know who else is a great history teacher? We've talked about this many times before. Is Dave Grohl. That guy goes out of his way to tell you the history of rock and roll and things. He makes so many different movies and documentaries, giving you the backstory on things. Apparently, he's got some new stuff out with he and his mom.
Oh yeah, his mom,
Cradle to Stage. What and then she started. It was like some podcasts. I think it's on TV now, and maybe they're finding other. So I guess as Dave, so did anybody happen to see, not last night, the night before, so Monday night on Jimmy Fallon, Dave Grohl co-hosted the entire show with Jimmy Fallon and sat at the desk with him.
Oh, no way.
And it was incredible.
No,
it was incredible.
Did he play with the Roots? Did he play with the Roots?
Yeah.
Oh, he did? Oh,
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I got to check it out.
They went back and forth. They did all the silly skits together. But Dave's like trying to keep the history of rock and roll alive too. Yeah. And so, because you've seen like documentaries like Sound City, down in San Fernando Valley. You've seen all these early, kind of going out of Nirvana into Foo Fighters documentaries. Mm-hmm. And then anyway, he did some stuff with his mom. He said when his mom was a school teacher, and after 35 years, she retired. Mm-hmm. And then she decided I want to go on the road with the Foo Fighters with Dave. Mm-hmm. Dave's like, of course you're coming on the road. And so he's taking his mom on concerts. So she's backstage, he'd come backstage and she's hanging out with Green Day. And
no way.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But they started wondering, and she said, where are all the other moms of all these rockers? And so they went on a quest to find all the moms, and it was ultimately to create this podcast to talk to who are the moms who raised these future rock stars, basically, and what was that life like? And
wow. Yeah.
Anyway, it's like a podcast, but it's on I don't know, Paramount or some channel right now that you can check it out.
I'm surprised there aren't more cool moms. Mm-hmm. Usually,
absolutely,
people are pretty proud of their kids if they have musical talents, I think.
Yeah,
the other way around. Well, how come you're not going to be a doctor?
Well,
or a lawyer?
There's probably a lot of that.
Stop playing that silly guitar. You'll never amount to anything.
Well, because as Dave Grohl said, he was touring by age 17. In a punk band. And so you also had to have parents who maybe were understanding. Some parents might say, go back to school. Don't throw away your life being in a punk band.
Playing that noise. Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
I don't know, but that was quite the history lesson and a plug for Dave Grohl. By the way, Dave Grohl, we're still after you, man.
Yeah, we need
anytime. We're right there.
We need to have him on the show.
Oh, you want to have him on the show? No, I want his job, his guitar playing job, and you want his vocals. So we need to.
But
don't lose sight of that. Lose sight of that.
Maybe step one.
Yeah. Okay. Have him on the show.
We have him on the show. He might come on the show. He's a real nice guy.
Who knows? He might actually know something about IoT. Mm-hmm. Maybe some of that. Seattle area tech mumbo jumbo rubbed off on him.
Maybe,
maybe he's walked past enough Amazon Go stores to
maybe
get a feel for what being, sort of instrumented and monitored is like.
I'm just glad that we started the show off with Spoon Man.
Yeah.
And Chris Cornell was the ultimate legit. Rest in peace, Seattle boy, born and raised, and was just a local kid, and a lot of people don't realize a lot of those bands were around in the late 80s doing their thing. You just being how it is when you start a band, you're small and no one knows you exist.
Oh, nobody knows you.
And then all of a sudden one day, and it's like Dave Grohl was saying the other night, he's like, dude, we were playing shows for like 10, 20, 30 people in Nirvana. And then overnight we were playing stadiums. I mean, it was just like,
Yeah, that's crazy. Especially as kids.
Yeah, we were nobodies, and playing local bars and stuff like that. And then they went down to Sound City in LA and San Fernando Valley and recorded Nevermind, and everything changed overnight for those guys. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah. I've only gotten onto festival stages, meaning small, like, Cinco de Mayo or.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you're,
regional, like little city type of things, being featured with.
I thought you were going to say Lollapalooza or something.
No. I mean, those are major festival. Yeah. Ours were small. They had something to do with tacos. I mean, I was in a Latin fusion funk, rock soul band, and we did original music. So, we did what was called the burrito circuit. So,
whoa,
that's what they called it. I'm just saying.
Circuit. That's cool.
Well, yeah, there's a thing called a burrito circuit down here, and there's a bunch of bands that are part of it. But anyways, we're going to be talking about Cylons attacking once again.
They are.
So, it seemed so here. So the latest thing is this company called Kaseya, right?
Yeah.
But here's the weird thing. We've been talking about Battlestar Galactica and Cylons for a long time on the show, right? I mean, if you go back to probably like episode 12, we've been talking about Cylons. And, there's this really odd coincidence. As we've been talking about the Cylon stuff, that first it's not the first ransomware attack, but the ransomware attack against the pipeline, the company is called Colonial Pipeline, right? So the Cylons attacking the Colonials fleet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we always talk about how, we need to really start thinking about maybe doing that whole Battlestar Galactica thing, going analog networked network computers and stuff like that. And
maybe for
air gapping.
For our audience, maybe you should fully describe what Battlestar Galactica did.
Oh, yeah.
In reference to what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. So, think about this. So the Cylons, for those of you who didn't grow up in the 80s watching, or 70s actually watching this show as a kid, it was the next best thing to Star Wars, right? And so Cylons are basically like replicants then again, that's a pretty old movie too,
they
right?
had their eyes were going.
Yeah, yeah. Sort of, and Kit did that as well. So who knows? Kit might have been a Cylon car, right?
Yeah, probably.
Right. And so, humans created the Cylons as robot servants, right? And then, of course, they rebel eventually, and then they reach a level of intelligence where they're now building their own weapons, and they're fully digital and tech connected. And actually, they consider themselves an ecosystem. I wonder where they got that from. They got them from us. So they decide, hey, we're gonna rebel and take over, and so they initiate an attack on humanity, basically wiping out almost everyone except for a few in a ragtag fleet of remaining colonial ships. So there's 12 colonies. Okay, just think horoscope and all the different signs, and so the city that or the planet that gets hit that the Battlestar Galactica is a custodian of is Caprica. And so these ships rendezvous, take off, and they're able to survive, or at least the Battlestar Galactica survives because it's an old clunker. It's analog. You use wired telephones. So it's really interesting, It's a great analogy to what we're going through today. I mean, really oddly. And if you watch the show, and I've been watching the show because it's been like almost 2 decades since that series came out. Yeah. And you learn a lot, actually, kind of like what's that movie? Greyhound.
Yeah. Yeah.
For you're a submariner, right? So there's all these wonderful analogies and things that you can take away from how taking a step back from all this digital stuff and connected stuff could be important. And
so are you saying that fleet in Battlestar Galactica and humanity, were they super connected, super digital, and that worked against them?
Oh yeah, they got their asses kicked.
But Battlestar Galactica itself, that one ship,
survived.
Was an old clunker. Was it just not connected, not high tech, and therefore couldn't be infiltrated by the robots?
Yes, it was like the Pinto. So it was like the Pinto of Battlestars.
There you go.
Right?
A lot of people say okay, maybe just people on the fringe, but maybe they'll turn out to be right.
Maybe it's just you.
Maybe it's just me, that they're saying, make sure that you buy every car you buy from now on needs to be from the previous century. Back when they were just fully mechanical and not all the computers and connected, because the connected cars are the ones going to be hacked to oblivion.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, seriously, it's pretty scary stuff. And you know what? Security and privacy is an afterthought. So when you talk to all of these companies that are at the forefront of this connected car movement, they talk about security. There's no specifics. It's a box either on the side or in the bottom or in the middle somewhere of an architecture diagram. And there's no specifics, right? And so, so this Kaseya attack thing is pretty freaky. It's another attack on a IT management, remote management system company, right? And it seems like these ransomware attackers are focusing on these types of companies because they have this huge critical footprint across not only enterprises and their environments, but cloud environments as well, right? So public cloud providers use some of these tools to manage their cloud.
This is their way in, is through the Kaseya tools.
Well, I mean,
kind of like SolarWinds tools was their way
in.
Okay.
It's exactly like.
So instead of doing a frontal attack on your infrastructure, they're like, we're going to hack this thing that we know you use and you trust, and then that's how we're going to get in. It's pretty scary stuff.
Super scary, creepy stuff. It is
scary. Are people freaking out? Or are they still going about their lives every day like they're going to get their lattes and whatever?
Quite honestly, I mean, it's like anything else techie. Most people don't give a crap.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're retaining our non-E rating here. I did say ass and I just said crap. Hopefully
I think
that doesn't trigger the E. Okay.
No,
but I think you're completely, I think you're right. It's people just don't understand the stuff. They don't care. And then the companies that get hit, they blame somebody else.
I heard the phrase, but I know I talk about it too much. When I read here, I'll show the book. I'll give the book another plug.
Okay.
When I read,
holy crap, that thing is huge.
When I read this book here, okay, all right, I'm going to tell you the truth. I listened to Audible and listened to it while driving, and
I was wondering. Anyway, I was really wondering about that. That's a thick ass book, dude.
Yeah, there was a phrase in there. It was probably coming. I think it came from somebody in Ukraine that said, "Smart cities are dumb, and dumb cities are smart."
I like that. So mysterious.
Well, it's from people who have suffered greatly. I feel like corporations and different entities are suffering greatly in the US and other places with these hack attacks, ransomware, stuff like that. But I don't know that Americans have felt the pain the way the Ukrainians felt it when the Russians literally shut down the whole country.
Oh yeah.
And like when all the lights go off, every computer screen goes off, when all your trains, everything just starts to shut down, and the heating and air conditioning don't work, all kinds of stuff. And it turns out that was just the Russians trying out the tools that they grabbed from the NSA, and just doing a test run on the Ukraine. And so when you've lived through that and people go back to pencil and paper and they start to have a different perspective, they start to go, maybe we were stupid to do all this digital stuff, because look what it made us vulnerable. But they go, but at least we're not the Americans, because they're way more connected and they're trying to automate everything digitally through connection. I mean, that's what we do. That's what you and I do. That's our jobs. We're trying to digitize our whole everything and automate it and connect everything. Yeah. And they think that that's the worst thing you could possibly do.
Right. But here we also caution. So, as much as like for me, I'm not a proponent of hype. I'm not a proponent of some of these folks just going bonkers with agile DevOps, this MVP stuff. You know that
Agile DevOps MVP.
You know, I'm not a big fan of that stuff. You know, I always bring up, and a lot of us do, security, the importance of security, and how actually there's this culture, and I wrote about it on LinkedIn, that we're starting to subscribe to in this whole digital thing where we just have to pump stuff out, and most of it is crap. And, you know, quite honestly, if you think about this company at Kaseya, they've been around for 20 years. Their origins were software development, right? There was no cloud back then. And then they made the transition to cloud. Now, the system that got hit, it's this thing called VSA, which is their remote monitoring and management system. Okay. Yeah. Oh, we have Stephanie on.
No way.
Hey, Stephanie.
Say it isn't so.
It's awesome. It's nothing but goodness.
Excellent.
Oh, look at, she's got her Adidas on. Maybe we weren't going to do gangster rap this week. Sorry.
You want to talk about some Run DMC?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
They weren't gangster. They were like candy pop rap.
My Adidas.
They definitely weren't gangster rap. No.
Oh, they were awesome though.
But thank you for Adidas. You know, that's how we have all our Yeezy shoes, right? Yeah. Because they're all Adidas shoes. You know, your Yeezy 350s, your 700s. You know, the used.
Rob's a collector, huh?
I am.
He's a historian. You know why he's so knowledgeable? Do you know why?
No.
He reads books all the time.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I'm an Audible book person. I listen while doing 20 other things.
Well, that's what I was just saying to Leonard here, because Leonard was like, wow, that book is really thick. And so I admitted that I listened to this via Audible. And it was a good way to learn how the world's going to end because of cyber attacks. Hey, by the way, speaking of Audible and not cyber attacks, you know, because you're right, I'm a big fan of reading is a good thing. I like it. All right, is everybody loves Matthew McConaughey? All right.
Right.
And you know, he wrote a book called Green Lights.
I did that one on Audible. It's good.
And I just want to tell everybody that it might seem like heresy, but I encourage you to listen to it on Audible because he narrates it and makes it so much better by having his voice and his personality tell you the story of his life. It's amazing.
It's really good.
Yeah, I just listened to it. My wife and I, we drove down from Seattle down to Bend, Oregon to spend some time, and we listened to it down and back, and it was amazing. Just amazing stuff.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah. So, by the way, Stephanie, we're talking about Cylons attacking again, and this is that whole Kaseya thing. And then I brought up the fact that we've been talking about the Battlestar Galactica thing the whole time. Think about it: Colonial pipeline, Colonial fleet, Cylons attacking Colonial fleet. We're just so.
It's like
we're mystic. Aliens. We're IoT mystics. We're not just experts.
Such nerds.
We're just off the charts. We're like super Buddha. We're beyond Buddha. We're like IoT Nirvana.
Rob has all these props now. Are you creating cartoons or what?
I got SIM cards too. I got lots of SIM cards, you know.
I'm waiting on my SIM card. T-Mobile's sending me one so I can test it out this way.
What, a SIM card for a new phone? Or okay. How come they're not doing eSIM?
Or eSIM, yeah.
Oh,
what they have.
Yeah, see, I don't get that. Why you need a card? I guess they have to send you the little barcode thingy.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, well, and that's what they're trying to. That's one of their promotions is this. Hey, you want to test this out? We'll send you the eSIM and test this out with your existing phone.
So that's what I've got, a bunch of eSIMs. So, you know, I've been working, speaking of security, I've been working diligently on Project Thunderstruck. In fact, I was excited. Yesterday, I was back at the co-working space I used to go to back when I was building enterprise IoT in the Moab platform. And so it's called Atlas Workbase. It's in downtown Seattle. And just working diligently on Thunderstruck, which is turning into this IoT security product, you know, aside from getting you to market faster. And so it's you talked about writing the code and caring about security. And it's like every minute as I'm writing this code, that's the whole thing is about security. It's about lots of little things too. It's like, well, what's, you know, how a lot of times we talk about digital twins and just doing simple pattern matching. We expect this value. We got this value. What do we care? What does that mean in a KPI or whatever? Yeah. So I'm doing that with simple security stuff, you know, just a baseline, you know, because it's always a defense in depth that you always create as many moats around your castle as you can, and you do zero trust. And so it's like, we start with things, TLS, make sure it's encrypted. Was it TLS or not? Authenticating the credentials, your security token, your identity. Do I know who you are? My system, it's kind of, and so we're going to do a trial next week, actually. Actually, the week after next, I'm sorry, out on a farm in Eastern Washington. This is called an Ardesco device that was created jointly with Ericsson and Nordic Semiconductor. And we built this thing. It's got a bunch of, you know, sensors in it, you know, heat, temperature, humidity, pressure, air quality, GPS, accelerometer, and stuff like that. But it's also cellular based. And so I got all these SIM cards, these eSIMs I'm going to use on this stuff to do their thing. And, you know, you're seeing, trying to make cellular more palatable for folks doing IoT. It's got to be, the price has got to be right. And so you're seeing some of these companies that are doing kind of this pay as you go, you know, some as cheap as 1 penny per megabyte. And if you're doing something like this first use case will be agriculture, we're just going to be doing little chirps, you know, and so it's not a lot of data at all. But what are we going to do? We're going to say, well, what was the source IP address of this thing? And then we're going to compare it. The customer will say, well, here is the IP range I expect my IoT devices to come from. Like, you know how you do your little 4 octets for your IP address, but you do the subnet, the first 2 octets for your subnet and so I'm going to we'll compare the IP addresses of inbound telemetry to what the customer says. You should only be getting data from this stuff. And so I'll do a check against that. And if it looks like it's coming from hackers in Russia, we'll probably not accept that deal. We might shut those things down, you know, or remotely disable devices, you know. Anyway, the whole thing is just all these security checks going on. Is we expect the frequency to be once every 60 seconds. Yeah. Is it now starting to arrive once every millisecond? Maybe that's not what we expect. Let's shut that thing down. Anyway, there's lots of just simple pattern matching stuff you can do as far as raising your shields and protecting your customers' critical infrastructure.
I think a lot of it's weird because a lot of folks think that it has to be just cut and dry, but those are, you talking about just the pattern recognition and something being out of whack, and it seems so simple, but I don't think a lot of folks think about security that way. They're just thinking about what do we do after we get, there is a breach. Yeah. Or how do we identify that there is an actual breach?
Oh, security. Yeah. That's so right.
or they just get like a lot of times we talk on the show about people just trying to be a little too smart for their own britches, and so they're overthinking. The security's got to be some crazy AI thing, and it's like, you know what? If you look at most of these hack attacks, some of them are pretty simple. There should be some really common patterns of things that you should do. This should be on your radar that says, hey, you need to check this out, or hey, we're going to shut this down for you. Yeah. Something doesn't look right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm going to shut it down. Yeah. Well, you're going to have to do some live videos of your test. I will.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll do live videos from this farm. It'll be a lot of fun. And we're going to create fake denial of service attacks on the customer's infrastructure, and then you'll see the Thunderstruck system recognize the attacks happening out on the network and turn off that fire hose so that it never reaches the customer's systems.
See, he's eating the IoT Coffee Talk dog food.
I am.
That's awesome.
Well, you know what? It would be even cooler is if you were out there at one of those vineyard agricultural sites, so we can see see it all come together. Rob with the sommelier, with the wine, with the agriculture, with the vines.
Maybe I'll, so it won't be this week, next week, but the week after. So that week of the 19th, it won't be wine this time. I know everybody loves vineyards and IoT. This time it's gonna be different. It's gonna be beer. I'm gonna be on a hops farm.
Oh,
that's cool.
And so when you see a hops farm, and you probably don't see too many of them, but they're in this town of Yakima, Washington. It's neck and neck with Bavaria, of the largest hops producing area in the world, where we create beer. And so these hops have these trellises, these wooden trellises. They're like 18 feet tall, and the hops go up the side of that stuff. And then they have irrigation going down the middle. And we'll detect soil moisture and a bunch of other factors. And so not only will we provide value to the customer, who more and more customers, as precision agriculture is growing, because we need to create more food and less water and fewer chemicals and blah, blah, blah. So that's going to happen, but maybe I'll broadcast live. Maybe I'll join IoT Coffee Talk live in a hops farm.
Maybe you need to get out to, I know that there's some marijuana growers out that way. That would be an interesting, because they're pretty technologically advanced, if you ask me, but that'd be interesting as well.
They have some pretty good security too.
Yeah, it's called AK-47s. Yes, well, don't stumble upon the wrong place in Humboldt County, California. Because we got the best security in the world. They probably have landmines in addition to ARs.
Yeah, but you know what? One of the things that I think is really should be a big takeaway from these attacks is this. A lot of these are supply chain related, software supply chain related, and a lot of them are at massive scale because most of these things that are getting attacked and compromised are delivered through a cloud-based service model, right? Or service delivery model. And so we've somehow gone from, oh, hey, the cloud is not secure, to this mythical notion that it is secure. And then now we're coming back to this place where, hey, it's my son.
Awesome.
Say hi. To a place where now all of a sudden we're questioning that hypothesis, right?
Yeah.
That the cloud is secure. And it's becoming a scale out platform for these these 0-day attacks, right?
That's a great commentary.
Yeah, and should we just get to a point to where we're actually verbally out saying this to our customers? Hey, nothing is secure, nothing is safe, but these are the things that I can do to help mediate, detect, monitor, help and support this, because it's almost as if people are selling their wares with the verbal promise to customers that, hey, we're safe and we're secure. Yeah. And you aren't. And because, you know what? Exactly. There's some that are more safe than others, but customers believe their vendors. Yeah. And this is being told to them.
This is the moment in the show. This is that nugget right here. Right here. Market. What are we? We're at 30 minutes. You're absolutely right. And because what a lot of IT organizations as customers have done is they've gone into this mode of outsourcing the infrastructure, right? It's become this it's a service. They're becoming service managers. They've now placed all that liability on their service providers, and they don't rightly, and we've seen this happen before, hold their service providers' feet to the fire. They don't even know how to measure or qualify the security practices and the actual security maturity of these service providers. And we're seeing evidence of it, whether it's Microsoft or AWS or any of these guys, they're not immune. And we're discovering, and here's the thing, no one's going to go and investigate these guys, right? Because, who's going to pay for that kind of study other than the government or some sort of large movement by the industry to go to instill some degree of quality into how IT services are delivered. But what we're seeing obviously are major holes. This is the evidence of it. So while what we're saying is ultimately uncomfortable for the industry, it's a major caution to everyone, especially CSPs that are now looking to go into the cloud and put their 5G cores on the cloud. So, and then what do we see with Jedi?
Wow.
They pulled that from
a lot of folks in Redmond aren't happy today.
Super pissed off, and they'll be pissed off that we brought it up on the show. They'll be going those.
Well, you know what? It's weird because it's like, I would almost be more comfortable as a business or an enterprise that, especially my tier 1 critical vendors and service providers that I'm working with, that they have transparent audits, that they actually share what's happening, but everything's just so hidden, so dark, so quiet. It's like, okay, when was the breach? How many breaches did you have? And you put out a sustainability report, but you don't put anything about your vulnerabilities and things that are happening on your network that you've mitigated. Like, gosh, you know what? There's probably some really good news of all the things that you stopped. Just like the government says, if you only knew from a cybersecurity perspective how many breaches were coming in to all of our government assets that we've stopped and that we've thwarted or we've done some things against to stop that we don't see. But from an enterprise perspective, I don't know if we as customers have to hold our vendors' feet to the fire even more so, or if we have some pushback, but there should be some more transparency around what's happening out there, because we all can learn from each other as well if we're doing that. But I don't know what the answer is, because it's one of those things where when you do have these vulnerabilities on your network or through your services that you're offering, if you talk about those out loud, then especially from an earnings perspective, people get scared.
Well,
stop investing.
I think the first step is becoming aware and not denying the denial of it.
Don't be a denying denier.
Don't be a denying denier. And that's the good start. As when you ignore the problem, which is becoming increasingly impossible to do because it's has revenue implications and also livelihood and eventually safety issues and national security issues going forward. You just don't put a blind eye to it. The Cylons are attacking. Rob was freaked out a few weeks ago, and he's right. You read that gigantic book, and I think he's right.
I'm freaked
we need
out.
to take this stuff seriously. And then, when we're looking at connecting things, even vendors have to be careful because they're part of the supply chain, and their supply chain, and everyone's doing this ecosystem stuff. Who's vetting who? This company at Kaseya acquired 13 companies. How did they handle the post-merger integration of these companies as a small-scale software company? And then they stuck everything into the cloud. And then the thing that got compromised was the thing that they host in the cloud. It's their, unified remote management and monitoring.
I think the big difference around this one is generally when we see this all over the news, it's large enterprise, it's banking, financial institutions, it's oil, it's infrastructure. But this, everyone is vulnerable. This hit all of these small businesses, and some of these are larger small businesses that don't have the money to, pay these ransoms. And, but the reality is that we're all vulnerable. It's not just these large institutions that these guys are going after. They're going after anyone and everyone.
Right.
This has happened to get some notoriety because it blanketed these small businesses.
But here's the crazy thing, Stephanie. Kaseya is not exactly it's not like a Microsoft yet.
Never heard of them before this.
Attacking a company like this, has a scale out effect, a broad effect. And, where typically these smaller companies would not probably be likely targets in themselves in isolation, they become targets because this company basically has this network of customers that use its services. Mm-hmm. And if you attack them, you attack a lot of people. Yeah, multiple tenants, millions of tenants, thousands, hundreds, millions, whatever.
Millions of peaches.
I mean, imagine if they eventually they attack AWS or Microsoft in a substantial way. Right now, I mean, it's happening. It's happened. Think about, I mean, we can all be impacted. If you're using Office 365, you're say adios to your data. Do you know?
Yeah, you've seen the AWS commercial they've been running, and they show all this great, cool tech and things happening across the world, and then they're like powered by AWS, and it's like every industry, every little small thing you're thinking of that people don't realize is being powered by AWS. It's everyday things that you're interfacing with. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's take down one of those guys. You've got mass destruction.
The more tightly entangled you get with the Borg, with all your business and all your processes, the more vulnerable you are when the Borg gets attacked, and it permeates out to you, right? No doubt about it. It's funny, just the time building Azure, probably starting around, I mean, the groundwork was done like, between 2005 and 2010, but 2010, when we kind of really got it going, we spent a decade, certainly the first 5 years doing nothing but trying to convince people that it was secure. And we do the red team, blue team, and we do assumed breach, and we're attacking it. And a lot of, there's a whole lot of IT pros out there who are like, hell no, we're going to have to do the network on my data centers. And, but over time, we started to maybe, I'll use the word prove lightly, that at least I can't speak for AWS, that Azure was more secure than what your IT pros could pull off in your own data centers over time, because Microsoft threw so many resources at it, right? Had so many people and were so on it. But nothing's perfect. And so, we're seeing a lot of these kind of side door, outsourced software people attacks coming in, because you didn't vet, I saw people on Twitter yesterday, like people need to stop outsourcing altogether, because that's how this bad stuff is coming in through doorways that are open on the side of your building. They're not attacking from the front. They're coming in either through software that you've let in that you're trusting, and it gets hacked, or the old story of consultants or people who've been brought in from the outside who are subcontractors who aren't as vetted as your full-time employees or something like that.
Yeah.
It's always going to be a problem, for sure.
Yeah, but here we are, like pushing APIs, pushing integration with every third-party app and provider out there, and every, unvetted developer that's out there wanting to run something on your network or your system. And we're talking about scale with IoT, and that it takes a village, and that all of these vendors are collaborating and working together, but you're only as strong as broken link or that weak API or supplier or vendor that's partnering with you that is wide open. And so I don't know. I think that we've got tug of war going on right now. We want to see scale, which means that we're pulling in all of these vendors to work together, but yet we're creating quite a bit. We're not doing a good job in terms of our vulnerabilities that happen as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, vulnerabilities are not entirely sourced just from the technical vulnerabilities. I mean, it's process, it's mindset. It's like what I posted before earlier this week, which is this whole let's get crap out there as quickly as possible mentality. There is a lot of crap out there, and I think a lot of vendors are looking internally, at least, software development team leads are probably looking internally at their own operations and saying, well, we're not exactly level 5, on the scale of maturity and practices. And they're probably being taxed. They need to release new features and do all these things with limited resources and limited time. So the question really becomes, well, how well are you doing this stuff, and how are you letting quote unquote innovation compromise your diligence in securing providing a secure product and service,
Yeah.
and it's not, so that's that. And then there's all the practices, the governance, the architecture that you use to design services and products that are secure. And those always have to evolve. And I really I wonder how much attention is put into that stuff, because security is still just a footnote. It's just not something that they like to say we're secure. They don't exactly explain how they do it.
I kind of equate it. I equate it to the example of like just a general website. You have SSL enabled sites that are supposed to be secure, but the minute you embed some kind of code that the code comes from a non SSL URL or website, your entire site is no longer safe. It's no longer secure. But how many of us go to all these little widgets and gadgets and pop in things here and there because it's fast, it's easy, and it looks good? And you're like, oh, I'm going to embed this code here, there. This looks great. This form looks, and that's what we're seeing out there. I think I take that analogy and I put that on what we're seeing and what we're doing in enterprise. We are going after the quick and easy. This looks good. This looks great. It's too much embedded code that's not secure, and now we're wide open, and anyone can get into this site and through that back door and through that side door.
Yeah. And it's celebrated, all those new features, all it
looks great.
Moving. I mean, it drives the stock price. But what does security do? Well, we're investing a lot in security. Well, your stock drops, right? Because that's all R&D expense, product development expense. So
yeah.
But
how do we solve the next big breach that's coming?
Next big breach.
The next big hack. The next big Russian.
No. Acknowledge, become aware sooner than later. Educate. The thing is we were talking about moms earlier, right? Rock and roll moms. My mom wasn't a rock and roll mom. She didn't want me to play guitar. She didn't want me to do any of that noisy stuff. But most people are like my mom on the internet. She will open up every single attachment that anyone sends her. That's typical enterprise, I think. It's pretty bad. And I don't think security is this top of mind thing. It's going to take a bunch of these Cylon attacks for us for the broader population to care, where there's going to be some sort of policy action that's going to move the needle. Otherwise, I think these guys will probably pay the $70 million or whatever to unlock all the systems that got encrypted, and it's on to the next one.
Yeah. Stop clicking stuff, people. Stop clicking. Also, we've in our little chats, we talk about deterrence. I don't think there's any real deterrence to stop these hack attacks, because these hackers, for the most part, keep getting away with it and getting off scot-free. And and so
Bitcoin.
There's nothing that's putting the fear of God in them to make them stop doing it. And so just like people like me driving a ballistic missile equipped submarine to create deterrence from people attacking the United States, we don't have something like that. And I know that's an extreme example. For this cybersecurity, we tell companies it's your responsibility. We tell people it's everyone's responsibility. But I hear a lot of people pushing back and saying, where the hell's the government? Why are we not being protected? What the hell's going on? Why are you putting it on us? You don't put.
So Rob, are you saying that with the equivalent of having a military that's out there physically protecting, or
maybe
that we should have just as much? Well, we still need physical security, even with assets, but do we need to put an emphasis on building our own kind of armed militia cybersecurity teams for the government?
I'm not going to use that militia word, but yes, but yeah. Obviously,
armed and dangerous.
We do cyber. We have a cybersecurity folks in the military and the CIA, the NSA, and they're doing their stuff. And our adversaries probably feel like they have every right to attack us because they've been attacked by the NSA. But so far, whatever we've done in cyber response or strong talk, the president talking to Putin really tough, obviously that's not working. Right. And so I have likened it, and a lot of people do this, and they also think it sounds extreme. It's like when that solar winds thing happened and all these government agencies and the Pentagon and all these things got attacked and all this stuff was stolen and everything. And, you make the analogy, well, I go, well, in the olden days, before we had all this connected cyber stuff, to pull off what they did, they would have armed people coming in, breaking through the doors with guns and stealing files, folders, like old school. And there probably would have been people shooting at each other, and it would have been ugly, and it would be really difficult for them to pull that off. But it would have looked like a real battle of military armed people. And now we're in cybersecurity and we're acting all like, oh, well, I don't really feel any pain. The same result happened as if 1,000 Russian or whoever troops showed up at these agencies and somehow blasted their way in to steal all this information. Everybody's so mellow about it. If we started treating these cyber attacks the way we would treat a physical attack that had the same goals, maybe that would scare the hell out of these would-be attackers if they knew that actual guns pointed in their face and, scary, awful stuff could happen to them. That's what I mean by deterrent. And I don't feel like they're safe. They're thousands of miles away, sitting behind their computer screen. And then
there's a history of folks getting paid through Bitcoin, and they're just getting paid off, and they're on to their next one.
Yeah. The answer, Battlestar Galactica. I mean, it's sad. It is. That is the answer. That's how you harden yourself from this stuff. It's literally hardening your stuff. Battlestar Galactica is as hard as you can get. You can't hack it, right? That's why it survives the initial Cylon attack and, is ushering the colonial fleet to Earth.
I would like to offer up maybe something in conjunction with your Battlestar Galactica that's like this really dumb ship that can't be hacked. We should have our own Death Star with our primary weapon that could blow up planets, because you need to put the fear of God in these people and return fire when they attack us, instead of them just getting away with it over and over again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but in the interim, that's sort of what we have to do. We have to kind of reassess ourselves.
Yeah, first. But the scary thing is,
you need to know yourself before you can face an enemy.
Check yourself.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Exactly. And of course, as we know, a lot of times our enemy, these hackers are actually nation state hackers. They're doing it on the bequest of a country, and it's not just always just some guy in the mom's basement.
Right.
And that makes it tougher. It's geopolitics.
Yeah. It's more complicated when you have political and presidents and people running entire countries involved in diplomatic relations that can't be diplomatic when you're taking down my businesses in my country. But I don't know what's going on there, but I don't know how hard those closed door discussions were, but it sure does seem like a lot of concentration of these hackers in Russia.
Yeah, and but here's the thing: a lot of people talk about zero trust, right? Zero trust is about, whatever is important to you, you Battlestar Galactica as much as possible. It's you protect it. Seriously, that's what zero trust is about.
So Rob's saying we need to hit back, and we need to hit hard. We need to put the fear of God in them. And you're saying we can't do that. We just got to protect our own shit.
No. We do that anyways. And so if anyone thinks that we don't do that and haven't been doing it, is just completely naive, right? We do this stuff. I mean, we have a playbook that was, shared with the entire world.
Yeah, they know.
How you do this stuff. So, it's just, but in the meantime, what enterprises can do is they can really look at zero trust for what it is and apply it. Not just have a bunch of vendors saying, yeah, we do zero trust, thinking that it's all about securing the perimeter. That's not what it is. I had John Kindervog on my show for Next Curve, and he made it very clear this is about protecting those things that are valuable for you, and then on the back end of it, having a business continuity plan where if something like this happens, you literally have a manual backup strategy so that you don't basically go down. Your business doesn't go down. And so I can't think of anything more practical than that. Death starring these elusive targets. I don't know that I number one, it's going to take forever to do that. There's no way to attribute, any kind of improvement to that kind of strategy. What is it that enterprises can do today? It's these simple things. And, maybe another good second step is, really understand what zero trust means. Instead of going around saying zero trust, we do zero trust so that you can sell more of your software, which is probably not zero trust and maybe even crap because you're MVPing the stuff out into the market. That might be another good second step. And then getting to some practical steps on, okay, if we do get attacked, we do get compromised, what's our fallback position? Do we have a strategy? And these companies that have to shut things down, they don't have a strategy. They don't have a response to that kind of Cylon attack. I don't know. So that's where I'm coming from.
So you're saying we got to look at it from both sides. Okay, yeah. What happens before? We got to protect. We got to mitigate. We got to make sure we're doing as much as we can. And then on the back end, if we are compromised, we need to have a recovery plan. We need to have a manual. We got to go back to, manual processes and not rely on the network.
Yeah, think about it. You get this little notice to say, hey, if you want your systems unencrypted, it's going to cost you $70 million. Your response to them with full confidence is, no, we're not going to pay it. We don't need to.
Another place where there's weakness, and I know this seems like it shouldn't be happening, I'll just use Windows, for instance. There's Windows Update, right? That gives you updates to this, and it fixes security flaws and other things. So many people are not keeping their operating systems and software up to date at all. Basic. And we find out when they get hacked, and then we looked and they go, oh, wow, you hadn't updated it in like 3 years or something like that, or you didn't get the latest. And, I remember a long time ago when I was at Microsoft, we came out with Windows Update back, I think the Windows 98 timeframe. And then corporations started using it, especially when NT got really popular. But then they also said, well, we want to test what Microsoft's sending to us. So we don't want to just take whatever you're giving in. So we had this thing, WSUS or whatever, that was your own Windows Update server in your company. It would do the updates, and your super awesome IT people could test those updates to make sure it didn't break anything. And then they would release it. The speed with which these hackers are finding vulnerabilities and attacking stuff, it makes me feel like that mechanism doesn't work. It's almost like, I know it feels like you might break something, but I almost feel like you've got to trust getting those updates as fast as you can and not waiting for your IT department to say it's okay. Because I know lots of companies, they're probably like 2 to 3 years behind on their versions of what Windows is or things like that. Mac does the same thing. Obviously, your smartphones are updating all the time. Yeah. Those updates are critical.
Yeah. Right.
And you got to get them in a timely fashion. You can't wait.
Yeah, and just this morning there's a report of a security flaw in Windows. It's called Print Nightmare.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this stuff is getting pretty ugly. I mean, security professionals will say that, I told you so.
Yeah.
And we're probably telling them what they already knew for a decade already.
Right.
But you're also saying though, like Rob, there are some just simple checklists, like making sure software is up to date, making sure you're changing your passwords every so often, making sure you have 2-factor authentication. There's certain things that you can set now that are just, are given, but a lot of these businesses aren't even looking at that. And then, oh my gosh, now we're in trouble. But you're like, well, you haven't updated anything in 3 years. So you're saying that there's some basic checklists your IT department should be focused on taking care of now.
Man, there's a checklist of probably 10 or 20 things that are just basics that if you did that, it would thwart most of the problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that multi-factor authentication thing is key too.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're getting, I know people say, well, text is not good enough. All these things are layers though. It's better than what you had. Yep. Either getting a text or getting an email. I get emails almost every day saying, oh, it looks like you just tried to log into your Steam account from China. Was that you? No, it wasn't me. And here's the code to get in, and you didn't get it. I got it. Simple stuff like that.
I got one yesterday. Someone was trying to get into my Instagram account. So they're like, you're trying to change your password. I'm like, nope. So I mean.
Right.
Yeah. But vendors have to be careful too. I mean, that's all I got to say.
There you go.
We can sit there and, tell enterprises it's their fault, but if they're using a vendor that's not doing the right thing, not developing quality software and putting out quality services that are secure, they're part of the problem. And there's nothing that the enterprise can do about that other than not use that vendor anymore, right? And so that's that transparency thing that you're bringing. I mean, all the stuff is ugly. Sorry, it is. But, I think there has to be some honesty on what's going on.